Hello everyone, Corey Creed here from Social Fresh East in April of 2013, and we are on break, so we pulled Morgan Johnston from JetBlue out to talk with us. Nice job on your presentation.
Thank you very much, appreciate it.
Excellent. Tell us what your role there is at JetBlue.
I am the Manager of Corporate Communications and Social Media Strategist.
Okay, so what does that mean?
I get to play on Twitter and Facebook all day.
Excellent.
Realistically, I spend a lot of time working with our marketing team and our customer support team to make sure that we're all aligned in our messages and take a look at the atmosphere and what our goals are and try to activate on that.
So it's not just social media, it's communications and social media kind of combined?
Absolutely. Well, so obviously we tried to pair our social media along with our existing schedule, whether it's a marketing or communications, but all of that is really dependent on making sure that our customer support team is in line.
Gotcha.
Because with social media, it's so much about the conversation.
Okay, very good. Yeah, so I wanted to unpack a few odds and ends things that you talked about in your presentation, if you don't mind. One of the things you mentioned early on is from the beginning, JetBlue started in 2000, is that right? And social media really didn't exist, to speak of back then. And you said we were ready for it, we didn't really need to change much. What do you mean by that?
Well, absolutely. So when we started, obviously we started in the internet age, and right off the bat, a lot of our bookings were online. So we were used to an online sort of sense, but the idea of, from the beginning, it was all about the connection with our customers.
Okay.
And it was the connection with our flight attendants and our pilots and our res agents with our customers. So when social media came about, it was a natural extension for us to move from just that one-to-one interaction in person to an interaction online.
So where a lot of other companies were trying one communication to everyone, you were going more on one-on-one already before social media.
Absolutely, because I think the natural instinct for a lot of companies was this is another advertising channel. It's the one-to-many sort of approach, and we started looking at it the other way around. Let's start with the one and see if we can build a larger audience because the conversation is happening in a public space.
Now, I think a lot of businesses would be scared of that because when you go one-to-one, there's a whole lot of people out there. How do you keep that all up? And I want to talk specifically, in your presentation, you talked about the Hurricane Sandy and where 70% of the travel is coming out of the Northeast, or was it New York?
The Northeast.
The Northeast. Okay, so most of your travel is coming out of the Northeast. Hurricane Sandy this past year hits the Northeast so bad. And how do you talked about that you did it, but how do you have the manpower and manage that much communication when you try to do one-on-one at a time when everyone is coming at you probably?
Sure. Well, and we're not always going to get everyone.
Okay.
And we have to be okay with that, and we have to be understanding of that. But when you're doing this all hands on deck sort of strategy, the fact that what we're doing in social is reflective of what we're doing on the phones.
Okay.
There's some utility in that. And by the way, there's times where you can scale. So 90% of our audience didn't really need to talk to us individually. They just needed information. Okay. But if we've already established the trust in the communication channel, they're already going to be listening to us and what we're saying. So if we're pushing out information about this is what we're doing with our operations, this is where you can go to get your flight status, this is where you can go to do changes, all of these things help communicate to a larger audience and actually reduce overall call volume. Traditionally, we would have to put out a press release and hope that media picked it up.
Yeah.
With social media, we now have the ability to push out to a larger audience directly and ultimately make life easier for all of our individual communications. So those individual communications are actually really tailored to that one individual.
So I would assume at an airline, never worked at one. So obviously I would
recommend
assume
it, it's lots of fun.
Yeah, thank you. We'll see. So I would guess when something like Hurricane Sandy hits, the phone lines light up.
Absolutely.
And they probably don't get answered because they just don't have the, with Twitter and social media, have you done the measurements? Do you actually think you've been able to reach and affect and help more people using those social media channels than telephone?
Right. Well, and you don't plan a call center for an irregular operation. You plan it for day-to-day business.
Okay. Yeah.
And so you can do what you can to scale up the amount of response. But yeah, your phone lines are going to fill up. What we found with social media is, quite honestly, you can lower the call volume a little bit, just from those busy questions. Hey, what's the status of my flight? If you're saying, here's a website where you can go check the status of your flight, you're going to immediately pull all those people off the phones, and that's great. So that frees up the calls a little bit. if you're on top of that, also doing those one-to-one communications and saying, hey, come in, we can help you via DM to help rebook you if need be. We only have 30 people. We have 2,000 crew members on our phones, only 30 online. We're not going to be able to do the same volume. But one, we're showing a public example of the all hands on deck mentality that we're doing across the company. But two, we are trying to help, and we can move the needle a little bit. Our team was able to handle 60 rebookings an hour.
Wow.
With all these people kind of coming in, which is not huge in the overall scheme of things, but it's an added drop to that bucket.
Yeah. And so let's talk specifics. I think you said you had 30 to 40, somewhere in that range?
We have 30 crew members who are working around the clock as our social media support team.
Okay.
I call them B6 Black Ops.
Okay.
Love you guys.
Shout out to them.
Yeah.
Good. And so they're doing a great job. I assume when something big happens, it's all hands on deck. Everybody's
we try
on
to
call
get
as
we
best
try
you
to get as
can.
many of them in as possible.
Excellent.
And triage the mentions coming in. Obviously, there's lots of tools out there that allow you to assign tweets, and so we have one person who's kind of the routing and moving things to where they need to go.
And a big part of this you mentioned is not just handling the questions, but handing them off to the right person.
Absolutely. So we
team.
well, sometimes we'll reach out if there's a question that's outside the norm. We're not necessarily going to allow or enable somebody in the operations to answer via Twitter, but if we can get the information, we can outsource the information gathering.
Excellent.
And then we just can be the vehicle for helping give that information out.
And lastly, in your presentation, you mentioned that it wasn't just the storm itself, it was the day or two after the storm.
Yeah.
And that there was a lot of delays and things that happened not just the day of, but after. Is that right?
Absolutely. Well, and when you're looking at some of these operations, it's an interesting thing with the online community. People expect kind of this real-time effect. Once the storm is passed, everything should go back to normal.
Yeah, start flying.
And when you're dealing with something that's actually based on infrastructure, you have to make sure that our crew members can get to the airport.
Yeah.
If our crew members are still digging out their house, who's in the Rockaways that's underwater, we have to be cognizant of that as well. We have 400 people or 400 crew members in the New York area that were directly impacted. 80 of them lost their homes entirely. So telling those stories helps our customers understand who we are as a company, who we are as individuals. And that's really important to us too.
Fantastic information, and what we're seeing out of the conference, we're only about a fourth of the way through the conference.
Looking forward to the
You
rest.
did an excellent job. We're seeing that everyone's talking about stories. They're talking about not just social media, but the communication, the social media being part of the communication, and how it all ties in well together. So thanks so much for being a part of Social Fresh.
My pleasure.
Appreciate the interview.
Thank you very much.